Confronting Americans' adversaries was a bipartisan issue, as Congressman Hines just alluded to. We bring in Michael Waltz, former Green Beret, White House counterterrorism advisor, now a Republican House member from the great state of Florida. It's good to see you, sir. I'm particularly happy to have you on to talk about this parallel to 9/11 and how the Bush doctrine was enforced. The other part where this analogy breaks down is that al-Qaeda after 9/11 and before 9/11, after the USS Cole, was protected by the Taliban. In this case, you've got hackers protected by the Russian military with nuclear weapons. The dynamic's a little different, fair?
Yeah, it's slightly different, but where it's very similar is we saw a sea change from the Clinton administration to the Bush administration when it came to dealing with terrorism. In the Clinton administration, they dealt with it as a law enforcement problem. And after 9/11, that sea change was that this was clearly a threat against the nation. We went after these terrorists around the world. We took down the Taliban government that was sponsoring them, and we made it very clear. Look, Leland, I agree with some of the things Representative Hines said, but I still think we are way too reliant on defense here. We need to establish deterrence in the cyberspace, just as we've established in the nuclear space, and that needs three things. It needs capability, it needs political will to utilize it, and then you have to communicate what you're willing to do. We have the capability, but I don't think our adversaries think that Washington and this White House has the will right now, and we're certainly not communicating it. I want to see the lights flicker in the Kremlin. I want to see some capabilities demonstrated against Gazprom. I want to see some of these criminal hackers, frankly, show up in some not so great places with possibly some harm done to them, or at least demonstrated that we can. These regimes only understand strength, and only once we understand each other and what we're capable and willing to do, then can we have those conversations that Representative Hines wants us to have. But until then, it's wishful thinking.
It's always easier to negotiate from a position of strength. You get a much better deal. It was President Biden in the past couple of days said he didn't think Putin was testing him with these attacks against U.S. infrastructure. If Putin's not testing him, what's he doing?
Well, I think he's absolutely testing him, and I think he knows who he's dealing with from 8 years under the Obama administration. When they invaded Crimea just weeks after the Sochi Olympics, then sent the little green men into Ukraine, marched across Syria, reestablished themselves in the Middle East, and what was the consequences? We sent some blankets and MREs to the Ukrainians, so he knows what he's dealing with there. And again, I think there's an underlying premise in this White House that if we're nice to them, they'll be nice to us, and we can sit down and work this out. But right now they're getting away with it, and they'll continue to get away with it.
Yeah, I was there for the little green men, so I realized the impunity that the Russians acted with inside Ukraine. At the same time, though, if you want to talk about deterrence and standing up and saying things, I remember President Trump in Helsinki looking at Vladimir Putin and say, I believe him over the U.S. intelligence agencies, and not there was really no punishment for what happened in Ukraine by the Trump administration. You and I have talked a lot of times. I didn't really hear you admonish President Trump on these issues.
Yeah, I think President Trump believed in his head of state to head of state diplomacy and wanted to establish those relationships. He was consistent there, whether it was with Kim Jong-un or whether it was Putin or Erdogan or others. I didn't necessarily always agree with that. I did look at his actions on the ground, the sanctions they put on place, the anti-tank missiles that the Ukrainians themselves, they were absolutely critical to stopping Russia, and other measures that he took to reinforce Poland and put sanctions on Nord Stream 2 that inexplicably Biden has just lifted with nothing in return. So I think when you look at the actions on the ground, it's debatable whether that head of state diplomacy actually worked. But when you look at the actions, deterrence was established, and we didn't see this march across our allies like we're seeing now. And we certainly didn't see these kind of cyber attacks.
Yeah, and there's also 300 dead Russian Wagner mercenaries in Syria that laid down a pretty clear line by the U.S. military in terms of what was and was not allowed. Congressman Waltz, appreciate your insight, your service to our country over many, many years. Good to see you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Leland.
Have a great weekend.